Businesses take a trip around the world Thursday afternoon in an effort to strengthen international trade.
WIFR News reporter Sydney Stoffregan speaks with the representatives of several countries who all agree there are new partnerships to be built right here in Northern Illinois.
We are not going to do the business alone, but we need a partner.
It really is a small world after all. Consulates from 6 countries across the globe meet with local businesses to not only expand trade, but develop stronger international relations. A year ago, State Representative John Cabello started this forum to show local entrepreneurs how to make connections worldwide.
Some of the businesses actually wanted to get products from Canada that would help them here, and then they found businesses that would be able to take their products over to Canada.
Mario Quina, the director of the Portuguese Trade Investment Agency, shares that Portugal's cost-competitive nature drives leaders to lend a hand to emerging businesses.
Being incentives to set up shop in Portugal, taking them around if they need to find a strategic location for their factories or an office or even a tech hub.
Jun Yanagi, the Japanese consul, expresses the strong economic relation between Japan and Illinois, which he says is evident through one of our local hotspots.
You know, in Rockford, host famous Anderson Japanese Garden. Do you know that one? Yeah, showcasing Japanese culture and stunning natural beauty.
Both Canada and Germany look to expand future technologies by sharing ideas from one part of the world to the next.
I am hoping to meet the ones that I haven't met before.
We all face the same challenges and we cannot tackle them alone.
In Loves Park, Sydney Stoffregan, WIFR News.
Representative Cabello says next year even more countries have expressed interest in seeing what area businesses have to offer.
Love Anderson Gardens getting a little pub there.
Yeah, very
for
nice.
Sure. It's neat that he's so aware of it.
Yeah, definitely.